So I left off discussing core values, and we uh, just discovered that the author believes that the core values of those that live in America are that we are entitled to liberty, that we are very individualistic and have a commitment to personal initiative and self sufficiency, that we believe that at least the notion that people are entitled to equal treatment under the law is important, and we believe in our power and the fact that it is important to have power to self-govern, decide who our leaders are going to be, or have the leaders that we choose pick the people that do the work in government. But there are some limits on Americans' ideals, and there have been from the beginning. We have seen examples in history, we see examples today of failures to meet those high ideals. How can you say that all men are created equal in a society where slavery lasted for decades? How many of the people that were actually penning the all we hold these truths to be self-evident, all men are created equal, that phrase came from Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. He had a large plantation. After his wife passed away, he started a relationship with a young slave that he stayed with till he passed away. Had 4 or 5 kids. So who did they mean? What did they mean when they said equality? And then the people in power and the people that they appointed, namely the Supreme Court, the United States Congress, even the President of the United States, allowed Southern states to roll in Jim Crow era laws that said that people of color couldn't go in certain places, they couldn't go to schools, and the end of that systemic de jure of the law, segregation, only ended under force, with several presidents having to send troops or deploy troops to segregate schools. So it is something that we are looking at. It is something that we have to consider, that the equality has never been an American birthright. We see severe restrictions on over the years. We've seen severe restrictions on immigration policy. There was a time when there could be no voluntary immigration from any African country, from any Latin American country, including Mexico, all the countries in Central America, countries in South America and the Caribbean. We had Chinese exclusion laws. We had laws about Japanese immigration. Native Americans weren't given the right to vote in the United States until 1924. So we've seen immigration restrictions, we've seen voting restrictions. Women weren't given the right to vote until 1920. African Americans weren't, the right to vote wasn't really codified and enforced until the Voting Rights Act was passed in 1965 under LBJ. We continue to struggle. Even as a war was fought, slavery was abolished, women went to jail and had hunger strikes for the right to vote. We see constant struggles over the question of equal treatment of minorities. Today, as I speak, there is a young man in jail, a young man in the hospital, African American male, that was on camera shot in the back. And being from Texas, that's kind of one of the worst offenses. You don't shoot a person in the back. And he didn't pass. He's paralyzed. So we always have that question. Members of the LGBTQ community were not able to legally marry in all of the United States until 2015. We see disparities in public education. We see disparities in housing. We see the long-lasting effects of redlining. We see the higher education getting more and more expensive, but while at the same time being more and more necessary to sustain a household. So there are all kinds of issues that present themselves to those that we elect, and we have a little bit of control over, well, we have a lot of control actually over who ends up there. But then that always takes us back to our first lecture where we were talking about people not being self-informed and not being responsible citizens, so we don't always know or go and vote for the people that are in power. This graphic talks about college education. And notice that there are 3 states that I would classify as primarily blue collar. Arkansas, Mississippi, and West Virginia, where the amount of people that are college educated is less than 20%. There are a handful of states, Washington, California, Minnesota, Illinois, Virginia, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Vermont, New Hampshire, where the college education is 30% and higher. So the question just always becomes, is a college education necessary? Are the jobs that pay a living wage only those that require some type of certification or a college degree? Should that be? Should we have access to free community college? Would people value it if they didn't have to pay for it? When Pew Research took a poll and asked the question about what's more important, the freedom to pursue life's goals or making sure that nobody is in need. Notice the European countries put the freedom to pursue life goals under 50%, some of them well under 50%, while Americans had it almost 60%. So the way that we conduct ourselves and what we believe in America is different, or has been different than oh, and this survey was actually taken in 2011. I just noticed that at the bottom. So I really would like to see an updated survey. I wonder what it would be in 2020. I think that this number would be lower. Tell me what you think. Let's talk about politics and power. So politics just means the system in place that allows society to settle conflicts. It is the system that decides who's going to get what and how much we will pay for it, what it's worth. Power is being the individuals or groups that help to make those decisions. In authoritarian governments, and we hear that word a lot, that is one where one person or group is in power and they silence people that think differently or that want to take away their power. We in the United States have valued a free market society. We value democracy, demo meaning the people, and order being kept by a constitution. So we do not like when we feel like someone is trying to take away our power by being the one and only person that gets to say what's happening. Again, a democracy is a system where the people govern. It came from ancient Greece. In Greece, they had direct democracy. They would assign landowning men to do different jobs and they would rotate the jobs around. They made all the decisions. Nobody was elected. Everybody rolled up their sleeves. All the men rolled up their sleeves and did the work. So we have an indirect democracy in the United States. So we don't actually get in and roll up our sleeves. We elect the people that are going to roll up their sleeves and do the work, and then get to decide if they stay or not, based on whether or not they listen to us and whether or not they get the job done. In an indirect democracy, majoritarianism becomes very important, because when we vote, it is the group that votes for a person the most, votes for an idea the most, that gets to rule. Now, there are some limits on majoritarianism. You don't get to discriminate against the minority, and you don't get to silence the minority. But definitely the person that gets the most votes is going to be the person that wins, and the person whose ideas are more likely to go through. We'll also discuss pluralism. Groups get together and determine what government does. That has risen in the United States. George Washington warned us against it, but it has risen in the United States. And just the pure concept of authority, the recognized right of officials to exercise power. Power is deciding who gets what, when, and where. Authoritarian governments repress opposition through intimidation, through restriction of rights. They'll put people in prison. They will, if you've been watching what's going on in Belarus,